My name is Ethan Walker, and I never imagined I would be writing something like this. If someone had told me a month ago that I would experience death, not in the way people talk about it, but truly leaving this world, I would have laughed in their face. But it happened. I died. And what I saw changed everything. This wasn't just an out-of-body experience. It wasn't a hallucination or some strange dream. It was real, more real than anything I had ever known. I saw the world beyond, and I met Jesus. He revealed things to me, things about this life, the future, and a coming shift in 2025 that will shake the very foundation of everything we know. I don't share this lightly. I wrestled with this, questioning my own sanity, doubting whether anyone would believe me. But I know this message isn't just for me. It's for you, for everyone. Time is short, and I have no choice but to speak. I hope you listen. That morning started like any other. I woke up before sunrise, as I always did, my body conditioned by decades of routine. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, a quiet reminder that life was still moving forward unchanged. My wife, Linda, was already up, flipping through the morning newspaper at the table. The soft hum of the television played in the background, broadcasting another round of political debates that neither of us had the energy to care about. "Long day ahead?" she asked, not looking up. "Same as always," I muttered, taking a sip of my coffee. "Meetings, deadlines, more people demanding things." She gave a half smile. "You work too much, Ethan." I shrugged. Work was what I knew. I had spent 30 years in corporate finance, building a career that paid well, but took more from me than it ever gave back. The days blurred together, spreadsheets, phone calls, meetings with people who barely remembered my name. My son, Eric, used to tell me I should retire, take some time for myself, maybe move somewhere quieter. But what would I do with myself if I wasn't working? That morning, something felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on it. The drive to the office was uneventful. The sky was clear, traffic was light, and Frank Sinatra played softly through my speakers, filling the car with nostalgia. I was at a red light, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly, a quick glance at a text from my mother, a simple, "Hope you're doing okay. Love you." I should have called her back. I always meant to, but there was never enough time. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. I never saw the truck coming. There was a flash of movement, then an explosion of sound, metal crunching, glass shattering. My body whipped violently in all directions like a rag doll. For a brief moment, I felt the pain, sharp, overwhelming, all-consuming. And then, nothing. The world around me faded into silence. I was dead. I knew at the moment I felt my body slip away, the second the world I once knew collapsed into silence. But death wasn't what I had expected. There was no instant blackout, no sudden end, only a slow, eerie unraveling of everything I had ever been. I was floating, weightless, detached, unmoored. Below me, the scene of the accident unfolded in terrible clarity. My car, a mangled wreck of twisted metal and shattered glass, sat in the middle of the intersection. Steam rose from the engine, its hood crushed beyond recognition. People were running toward it, some shouting, others frozen in shock. A woman in a blue dress stood on the sidewalk, her hands covering her mouth. I could hear her heartbeat, erratic, panicked, as she fumbled for her phone. "Oh my God!" she whispered, voice trembling. "Someone call 911! A man in a baseball cap banged his fists against the driver's side window, trying to get a response. "Hey! Hey, can you hear me? Sir? I could see my body inside the car, limp, lifeless, broken. But I wasn't there anymore. A wave of sheer panic crashed over me. I wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't right. This wasn't real. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. I reached for my body, desperate to get back inside it, to wake up, to undo whatever had happened. But my hands, or whatever I had now, passed right through it. I wasn't solid. I wasn't flesh anymore. My mind raced. Am I dreaming? Is this some kind of hallucination? But it wasn't. Something stronger than gravity took hold of me. A force, unseen but undeniable, was pulling me away from the wreckage. It wasn't violent, but it was absolute. I fought it. I clawed at the air, struggling against the invisible tide dragging me upward. No, wait! No! I can't. I don't want to. I wasn't ready. I wasn't supposed to die. I had a wife. A son. A life. This couldn't be happening. But it didn't matter what I wanted. The world below grew smaller, fainter, as I was pulled higher and higher into something vast and infinite. The voices of the bystanders faded. The sound of sirens blurred into nothingness. Then came the darkness. It started at the edges of my vision, creeping inward, swallowing everything in its path. At first, it was like looking through a tunnel that was slowly closing in. But it wasn't just darkness. It was something more. Something alive. It moved like ink spreading through water, thick and heavy, pressing against me from all sides. It had weight. It had presence. I wasn't alone. I felt it before I saw it. A deep, suffocating cold wrapped around me, dragging me into its grasp. It didn't just touch my skin, it sank into me, filling my chest, my mind, my very being with something ancient and nameless. I heard whispers. Not with my ears, inside my head. They slithered through my thoughts, twisting, warping, planting doubts. You don't belong there. You were never good enough. They won't miss you. The voice wasn't loud, but it was insidious, seeping into the cracks of my soul, prying them open. I wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. I turned my head, or at least I thought I did, and that's when I saw it. The light. It was ahead of me, burning like a distant star, impossibly bright yet gentle, warm, familiar. And for the first time since leaving my body, I felt something other than fear. Hope. I reached toward it. But the darkness, it wasn't passive. It was waiting. Watching. Hungry. And the moment I tried to move, it lunged. I didn't hear it, but I felt it scream, a voiceless howl of rage as it coiled tighter around me, pulling me away from the light. The weight of it was crushing, suffocating. It whispered faster, louder, desperate to drown out my thoughts. You will never escape. You are mine. Stay. I felt myself slipping. The light was getting further away. And then, a voice. Not like the whispers. Not like the darkness. It cut through everything, clear, strong, powerful. Ethan, keep moving! The darkness recoiled like a wounded animal. The grip around me shattered. The whispers vanished. I gasped, or at least, I thought I did, as I surged forward, the light rushing toward me. I didn't need to be told twice. I was moving, fast, impossibly fast. Not falling. Not flying. Something in between. The light ahead of me grew larger, pulling me forward with an unseen force, while behind me, the darkness snarled, writhing like a living thing that had just lost its prey. I didn't dare look back. I was rushing through a tunnel, but it wasn't like any tunnel I had ever seen. The walls weren't made of stone or earth. They shifted, pulsed, almost like they were alive. They flickered between shadow and brilliance, as if reality itself was being stretched, pulled apart at the seams. I tried to control my movement, to stop, to slow down, but I couldn't. I was being carried forward by something far greater than myself. Then I felt them. I wasn't alone. At first, it was just a presence. An overwhelming sense of something watching, waiting. Then, shadows moved within the light. Figures, tall, undefined, their forms shifting, glowing, radiant yet unfamiliar. They weren't human, at least not in any way I understood. But they weren't terrifying either. They were guiding me. "Where am I?" I whispered, or maybe just thought it. There was no spoken reply, but I felt an answer resonate within me. "You are between." I didn't understand. Between what? Between life and death? Between here and eternity? The tunnel widened. The movement around me slowed. For the first time, I felt a sense of control return, but with it came something else. A flood of memories. Not just mine. Memories of things I had never known, never been told, yet suddenly I understood. The way the world truly worked. The battles I had never seen. The forces constantly at war, fighting for every soul, every moment, every decision. I had spent my entire life believing in what I could see, touch, calculate. But here, none of that mattered. I had always thought of light and darkness as just metaphors, concepts used in stories, in religion, in philosophy. But here, in this place between life and eternity, I understood the truth. They were real. And they were at war. As I searched forward, drawn toward the brilliant light ahead, I felt the pull of something else. A weight, a presence, a force that did not want me to leave. The darkness wasn't passive. It was alive. It had intent. It had will. And at first, it was just a pressure, a suffocating heaviness clawing at my back, trying to slow my movement. Then came the voices. Not one. Not two. Thousands. They slithered through my mind, soft at first, then growing louder, more insistent. "Ethan, stop! You don't have to go. You are never worthy. You know where you belong. No one is waiting for you." I clenched my jaw, fighting against the words, trying to shut them out, but they weren't just sounds. They were thoughts. My thoughts. Every regret I had ever buried. Every mistake I had ever made. Every moment I had failed as a husband, as a father, as a son. They rose up inside me, twisting, suffocating, dragging me down. "You wasted your life. You don't deserve a second chance. She stopped waiting for you a long time ago." That last voice cut deeper than any wound ever could. Linda. A memory flashed before me, her standing in the kitchen that morning, looking at me with that familiar sadness in her eyes. "You work too much, Ethan." How many times had she said it? How many times had Eric, my son, begged me to slow down, to stop prioritizing meetings, deadlines, and numbers over the people who actually mattered? I had ignored them. And now, was this my punishment? I felt myself slipping. The light ahead of me dimmed, shrinking as the darkness crept closer. I could feel its icy tendrils tightening around my limbs, pulling me backward. I was losing. "Just let go," the voices whispered. "It's easier this way." For the first time since I had left my body, Fear truly gripped me. I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid of being claimed. Then, a voice cut through the darkness. A voice so strong, so powerful, that everything around me trembled. "Ethan, keep moving!" The word struck like a thunderclap, sending a shockwave through my entire being. The whisper shattered. The darkness recoiled, writhing in agony. And suddenly, I could move again. I surged forward, pushing toward the light, no longer weighed down by the past, no longer paralyzed by regret. The closer I got, the stronger I felt. The warmth of the light wrapped around me, filling me with something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The moment I crossed into the light, everything shifted. The darkness behind me vanished, swallowed by an unseen force. The whispers were gone, leaving only a deafening silence that made my heart, if I even had one anymore, ache with something I couldn't name. I should have felt relieved. I had escaped. I had reached the light. But instead, I felt something else. Regret. A deep, crushing sorrow settled in my chest, heavier than anything I had ever carried before. I wasn't in a tunnel anymore. I was standing, or maybe floating, somewhere vast, infinite. It was a place without walls, without sky, yet I felt more exposed than I ever had in my life. Then, in front of me, it appeared. At first, I thought it was a screen, a massive, shifting wall of light. But it wasn't. It was alive, pulsing, responding to my very existence. And then, it began to show me things. My life. Every moment. Every choice. Every failure. I saw myself as a child, running through the backyard, my mother laughing as she tried to catch me. The warmth of summer, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the safety of home, things I hadn't thought about in decades. Then, I saw myself as a teenager, bitter, resentful, always looking for a fight. My father's voice echoed in my mind, warning me about my temper. "Ethan, you can't go through life pushing people away." I had rolled my eyes back then. Now, I wished I had listened. The images kept coming. My first job, my first love, the day I married Linda, the day Eric was born. I felt every emotion, every ounce of joy, as if I were living those moments all over again. Then came the failures. The fights with Linda. The nights I had chosen work over my family. The missed baseball games, the forgotten anniversaries, the cold, distant way I had let my career consume me. I saw Linda sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where I should have been. I saw Eric as a child, waiting by the front door, clutching his baseball glove, hoping I would come home in time to play catch. I never did. God, what had I done? Tears burned in my eyes, if I even had eyes anymore. The pain of seeing it, of truly feeling it, was unbearable. Then I heard it. A voice, not harsh, not angry, but steady, filled with sorrow. "Now you understand." I turned, my breath catching in my throat. I knew who it was. I turned slowly, my entire being trembling, though I had no body to shake. And there he was. Jesus. I had no words for what I saw, for who I saw. He wasn't just standing before me, he was everything. He wasn't like the paintings, the statues, or the images I had seen growing up. He wasn't just a man. He was light, he was power, he was eternity itself. And yet, he was looking at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. His eyes, they held galaxies. They held every answer I had ever sought, every question I had ever been too afraid to ask. And yet, what shook me most wasn't their depth. It was what I saw within them. Love. Not pity. Not disappointment. Love. I wanted to fall to my knees. I wanted to cry out, to beg for forgiveness, to do something, anything to erase the weight of what I had just seen. But I couldn't move, because I knew I didn't deserve to stand before him. The memories were still flashing. Every selfish choice, every wasted moment, every time I had put myself before the people who had loved me. The regret swallowed me whole. And yet, he didn't look away. "Now you understand," he said. His voice wasn't loud, yet it shook the very core of my soul. I did understand. And it was unbearable. I didn't know," I whispered. My voice felt so small, so broken. Jesus stepped closer. "You did." The words pierced through me like a blade. Because he was right. I had known. I had always known. Every time Linda had asked me to put the phone down, every time Eric had begged me to come home early, every time my mother had called just to hear my voice, and I had rushed her off the phone, I had known. I had felt the guilt. I had ignored it. And now, it was too late. Tears streamed down my face, if I even had a face anymore. "I wasted it," I choked out. "I wasted everything." Jesus didn't argue. He didn't soften the truth. He simply watched me, letting me feel it. I expected anger. I expected judgment. Instead, he just nodded. "But it's not over." I felt the shift before I saw it. The space around me, once still and heavy with my regret, began to pulse with something else. A force. A presence. Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly, everything changed. The vastness of where we stood tore open, like a veil being pulled away, and before me, I saw, not a vision, not a dream, but something real. Something happening. Something coming. I gasped. It was Earth. But not as I had left it. It was alive, moving, shifting, as if history itself was unraveling before my eyes. Cities stood, roads stretched, oceans moved, but there was something beneath the surface, something beyond what human eyes could see. A war. Not one fought with guns or armies. A war of power. A war of souls. And then I saw the year. 2025. It wasn't just a date. It was a turning point. The earth trembled beneath an unseen weight, its foundations shaking. In an instant, I saw chaos, protests, division, fear spreading like a disease. Nations stood on edge, leaders whispering in dark rooms, alliances forming, plans unfolding. But this wasn't just politics. This was spiritual. I saw shadows, dark figures moving among world leaders, whispering, pushing, influencing decisions that would shape the fate of millions. Some of these leaders knew. Others had no idea they were being used. Then, my eyes were drawn to a single figure. A man. He stood on a stage, his presence commanding, his words igniting both hope and fury. I knew him instantly. Donald Trump. But this wasn't just about an election. It wasn't about politics at all. It was about what his return represented. A shift. A disruption. The enemy had spent decades carefully weaving a plan, controlling the tides of history without resistance. And now, something was threatening it. Something they had not accounted for. I turned to Jesus, my voice unsteady. "This is about more than a leader." He nodded. "It is about the battle you cannot see." I watched as forces, both of darkness and light, collided. The world was not as it seemed. Nothing ever had been. And the year 2025 would change everything. Jesus spoke, his voice steady, unchanging amid the storm. The enemy does not fight for power alone. He fights for control of the mind, of the soul. I saw deception thick as fog, covering the eyes of millions. People who thought they were fighting for truth were actually moving in step with darkness. They did not see. They did not know. They were being used. The division will deepen, I whispered, my heart heavy. It won't stop. Jesus nodded. It will not. My throat tightened as I saw what came next. I saw families turning against each other, friendships severed, people once united in faith now standing on opposite sides of an invisible war. I saw cities burning, not from fire, but from hatred, from lawlessness, from a chaos so deep it made the world unrecognizable. I felt my spirit tremble. God, what can stop this? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. And then I saw it. A force more powerful than the darkness. Prayer. Not the weak, hollow kind that people muttered before meals. Real prayer. Prayer that rose like fire into the heavens, pushing back the shadows, creating barriers that the enemy could not break. I saw angels moving at the sound of those prayers, shields forming around those who cried out in truth. I saw churches either rising or falling. Those who remained strong in faith became beacons, while those who had watered down their message became empty shells, abandoned by the very spirit they had once carried. Jesus turned to me, his gaze piercing through every doubt in my soul. Tell them, Ethan. Tell them that the battle is not of flesh and blood. They must be ready. And then, the vision faded. I gasped, a violent, desperate breath as my eyes flew open. Jesus is God! The words ripped from my throat before I even knew I had spoken them, raw and urgent, like they had been branded into my soul. I wasn't in the light anymore. I wasn't in eternity. I was back. Back in my body. Pain crashed into me all at once, my chest burning, my limbs heavy, my lungs struggling to pull in air like I had been drowning, and only now reached the surface. A beeping sound filled my ears. Machines. Voices. Movement. I blinked, my vision unfocused, the fluorescent lights above me glaring and sterile. It took a second, maybe longer, to realize where I was. A hospital. I felt fabric clinging to my skin, and 4 in my arm, wires strapped to my chest. Everything ached. A woman, a nurse, stood frozen beside my bed, her hand still clutching a clipboard. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with something between shock and disbelief. "He's awake," she whispered, barely breathing the words. Then louder, "Doctor!" "He's back." Footsteps pounded against the floor, and suddenly, a flood of voices surrounded me, nurses, doctors, hands checking my pulse, my vitals, shining a light into my eyes. But I didn't care about any of it. I had been dead. And I had seen everything. A man in a white coat, the doctor, leaned over me. "Mr. Walker," he said firmly. "Can you hear me?" I turned my head slightly, my throat dry, my body foreign to me. Everything felt distant, as if I was still caught between two worlds. "You were in a terrible accident," the doctor continued. "You've been unconscious for how long?" I croaked, my own voice barely recognizable. The doctor exchanged glances with the nurse. 5 days. I sucked in a breath. 5 days? I should have been dead. I was dead. The memory of the crash, the pain, the silence, the darkness, it all came rushing back. But more than that, the tunnel, the war, the vision of 2025, the battle raging unseen. And Jesus, standing before me. Jesus, revealing everything. A sob rose in my throat, unbidden, unstoppable. The doctor spoke again, something about a miracle, about how I had flatlined for 5 minutes, but somehow suffered no brain damage. I barely heard him. Because in the corner of the room, just for a split second, I saw something else. Someone. A figure standing bathed in light, watching me. And then, it was gone. Tears blurred my vision. My chest ached, not from the accident, but from something deeper, something inside me that had shattered and been remade. "I saw him," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I saw Jesus." No one spoke. But I didn't need them to understand. Because I understood. I had been sent back. And I had a message to deliver. I was alive. But I would never be the same. The days after my return blurred together, doctors running tests, family members crying at my bedside, medical staff whispering about how I had come back from the dead with no logical explanation. They called it a miracle. I called it a mission. Because I hadn't just survived. I had been sent back. At first, I struggled to speak about it. How do you tell people you've seen Jesus? That you've seen the war raging beyond this world? That 2025 will be a turning point unlike anything we've known? Who would believe me? But then, I remembered his words. "Tell them, Ethan. Tell them that the battle is not of flesh and blood. They must be ready." And so I did. I started with my family. Linda sat beside me in the hospital room, holding my hand as if I would disappear if she let go. She had been strong for so long, but now her eyes brimmed with tears, her fingers trembling against mine. I took a breath. "Linda," I said, voice raw, "I have to tell you what happened." She squeezed my hand. "You don't have to talk about it now, honey. You've been through so much." "No," I cut in gently. "You need to hear this." Everyone does. And so, I told her. Everything. The crash. The tunnel. The battle. The revelation of what's coming. She didn't speak at first. She just listened, her expression shifting from confusion to awe to something deeper. And then, softly, she whispered, "I believe you." Tears burned in my eyes. "You do?" She nodded. "Ethan, I've been praying for you for years. That God would open your eyes. That you would finally see." Her lips trembled. "I just never thought it would take this." I swallowed hard. Neither did I. From there, the message spread. Friends, colleagues, even strangers, I couldn't keep quiet. I had seen too much. I spoke at churches, gatherings, anywhere people would listen. I told them about the deception creeping into the world, the spiritual forces working behind the scenes, the urgency of prayer. Some scoffed. Some called me crazy. But others, they listened. Because deep down they knew. They could feel it. Something is coming. And we must be ready. I never thought I would experience death, let alone return to tell about it. But I did. And I came back with a truth that I cannot keep to myself. When I left this world, I was pulled into something far greater than anything I had ever known. I saw the battle beyond the veil, a war not of flesh and blood, but of light and darkness, truth and deception. And at the center of it all was Jesus. When I stood before him, I didn't just see a man, I saw eternity, love, and power beyond human understanding. He knew everything about me, my failures, my regrets, the moments I wished I could take back. But in his eyes, I found not judgment, but grace. A chance to change. A chance to return. I was sent back with a purpose, to wake people up, to tell them that time is short, and that faith is not just a belief, it is a battle. Now, I ask you, if you were in my place, if you had seen what I have seen, how would you feel? Would you continue life as if nothing had happened? Or would you surrender your heart to something greater? This isn't just my story, it's a call to action for you. If you feel the weight of this message, don't stay silent. Leave your prayer in the comments, and I will pray for you. Like, subscribe, and share this video so that others may hear the truth. The battle is real. The time is now. Will you stand in faith?